Hey, I'm Thundercloud here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame in the Seahorse Medicine Cafe. Wash away the garbage, leaving rainbows after rains. Let's have some fun and linguistic games. Yeah, you know what my mum calls me. James! Yeah. Hey, welcome to Chillin Tuesday on this 19th of September 2023. Oh, we've got lots of exciting stuff coming up here. Well, yes, we sure do. We've got the Trout Fest coming up in just over a week and a half. And at the Trout Fest, we've got many things happening. Well, as usual, tomorrow night we've got Wednesday Words, open mic poetry. Yes, that's true. But tonight, and so yeah, I hope to see you here. Tonight on Chillin Tuesday, I'm doing the legendary Colin Newsom from his book, The Green Tree Snake. Now, Colin Newsom was born in 1916 and died in 2008, so that made him 92. He was a pretty old fellow when he passed on. And the reason I'm doing that is because just the other day, a couple of days ago, Sunday, his son came and we're having a bit of a yarn, and he's going to send me some of his books, and I asked him if I could read his dad's poetry because it is still under copyright and owned by the family, of course. And so The Green Tree Snake, he said, yeah, you can read it out on YouTube, and here we are. So The Green Tree Snake by Colin Newsom. Now, Colin was quite an interesting fellow. He was born in Glen Innes up here on the what's called the New England tableland, the Highlands, and his father and his grandfathers were squatters and cattle duffers apparently, and made their money that way. Anyway, he left, and when he was a young fella, went off travelling, was a shearer, later on became a boxer with one of Jimmy Sharman's tents. With Jimmy Sharman's travelling boxing troupe. Now, one of the things about this building here, which the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame is situated in, is that they actually used to have boxing matches here. In fact, it was a very common thing right across this country to have boxing matches and boxing teams and travelling boxing and stuff as entertainment, and so it would have been quite exciting at the time. So on the Facebook page of the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame, you can go there, and I've put a link to an oral interview with Colin Newsom, and there's plenty more of that there. If you search in Google Colin Newsom in Trove, there's a couple of oral interviews, and they're quite interesting to listen to in stuff that's not written down. And that's what I was doing today, listening to some Colin Newsom in preparation for this. And this one book that I've got here in the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame library is The Green Tree Snake by Colin Newsom, and this was published in 1981, in Stanthorpe, reprinted in 1982. Printed by International Colour Productions, but the Colin Newsom was the actual producer of the book. Now, it's quite interesting. It's got a good forward to it, but I think Colin's life really speaks for itself. I'm going to read a bit of the introduction to the book. I would read the forward by his mate, but no, I don't want it. The introduction by Keith Garvey from Glen Innes, but I think it's better to just the forward. I was born on October 12, 1916, a black sheep of a New England family of 9 and a breech baby. Therefore, presented my parents with problems from the moment I entered the world. Many humorous friends knowing the circumstances of my arrival and my Dom quixotic inclination to tilt at windmills and bump my head against brick walls, claim I come into the world back to front, and have remained so ever since. A lover of sport, I boxed and wrestled for 2 full years on tour with Jimmy Sharman's boxing troupe on showgrounds throughout Australia, and for several subsequent years was engaged in that capacity at major shows at major and capital cities. During this time I also completed a rough riding and rodeo events. I attended show balls and dances, wandering home to the big top in the small hours often directed to the showgrounds by the crowing of the poultry exhibits. I took part in many bouts and witnessed many more. Some fared income, some faked. Strangely enough, the fake fights often created most excitement from the fans. This taught me to suspect that many things in life are faked. Televised political debates usually result in points scored on both sides to satisfy contrary opinions, while the real knockout blows are never displayed. Auction sales, which result in the most spirited bidding, I hold suspects at times and consider some sales to come under the prearranged category. Now, well, I'm not going to read on, but one of the things he wrote one of his early poems when he was serving in the military in World War II, and it was so anyway, I'm going to start reading his poetry, and before I kick off, I've just dropped his book. I need to acknowledge that we are on Banby and Kamilaroi country here, on this continent of Australia, and that sovereignty has never been ceded, and to acknowledge the continuing connection to the land of the Banby and Kamilaroi people and all the First Nations across this invaded continent. All right. Colin Newsom. Why do I keep calling him Kevin? I don't know. So the dedication of the book is to Australian shearers, because Cole was a shearer in his early youth. Dedication. To you who drank and laughed and sang and chafed your mates in wild mirth, to you who suffered every pang and pain excepting childbirth, to you who held up those who rode to wealth upon the sheep's back, your skill providing every load from camel train to jeep track. I have joined with you in song and shared your hopes and curses. To you, the strongest of the strong, I dedicate my verses. All right. So the green tree snake, this was when he was out shearing. This was written about a fella who had green trousers and he used to sit cross-legged. The green tree snake. The green tree snake, they called him. His trouser legs were green. They were cut in stockman fashion out of English gabardine. His legs were double jointed at the ankle, hip and knee. He could wind them around each other just like snakes in ecstasy, or wrap them round a brumby while it bucked across a flat, or bolted for the timber while he flogged it with his hat. When the Gundawindi outlaw threw the champions of the West, from Gore to Cunnamulla, top riders gave him best, while he played his concertina on the banks of Reptile Bend. The tree snake read the challenge in a message from a friend. In puffs of smoke 'twas written on the pages of the sky by the tribes of Boggabilla to their friends at Mungandai. The folk of Goondiwindi and Tallwood and Tabia, when they heard about the tree snake, rode in from far and near, and left the hut and homestead by river and lagoon, and billabong and bore drain for the yards at Callandoon. And there they boiled their quart pots and yarned and sat around and waited for the tree snake, while the outlaw pawed the ground. They mostly backed the outlaw, but the seeds of doubt were sown when old Red Jack from Texas said, "The tree snake can't be thrown." A man who's double jointed at the ankle, hip and knee must have a big advantage in balance. Ankle, knee and hip must have a big advantage in balance, strength and grip. And the young man told the ladies in the nonsense of the young, the tree snake shed his winter skin and had a forky tongue. Then after joke and rumour, gaudy tale and false alarm, the tree snake made his entrance with his saddle on his arm. He saddled up the outlaw while Red Jack held the reins, the best man at the horse's head that ever rode the plains. And the ringer's eyes were bulging, and the ladies held their breath, as the tree snake caught a stirrup on the outlaw, sudden death. He vaulted to the saddle, and he gave a bushman's yell, and sudden death was bucking like a fiend out of hell. The people cheered and cooed as they saw the tree snake ride, till the outlaw charged the stockyard fence and took it in his stride. He bolted for the timber and the girth and crupper broke, as he tried to smash the tree snake against a leaning oak. Then a cloud of dust rose behind them, and we saw them through the blur, when the tree snake hanging grimly like a big Ngurra burr. Perhaps 'twas an illusion of the dust along the trail. Was the tree snake riding back to front and steering by the tail? We found the broken saddle in the wreckage of their wake, but we couldn't find the outlaw, and we couldn't find the snake. So we reached the grim conclusion that the tree snake met his end when sudden death had thrown him in the flooded reptile bend, and had joined the river Brumbies, where the channels twist and break and the McIntyre River goes winding like a snake. But they tell another story in the campfire's drifting smoke, and perhaps it is authentic, though it started as a joke, how the tree snake gripped so tightly that he stopped the outlaw's breath. Then he slimmed him well all over, and he swallowed sudden death. Then he curled up for the winter in the hollow of a gum, with a side or two of bacon and a gallon jar of rum. And when the frosts have vanished, then the tree snake will appear, with his scales all bright and shiny, and a grin from ear to ear. The tree snake. So the story with that one was really liked by, and he sent it into the ABC and it got read out on the ABC. Alright, the next one is Anzac Day reunion. So one of the things about Colin Newsom, he served and went to, New Guinea and all around Anzac Day reunion. I asked a digger, I knew. What happened to Blue? He used to be in your mob. He had big freckled hands and could punch like Dave Sands. I know. I stopped one with me gob. He said Blue gave his life for the children and wife of a man dear to them and to her. in a bad jungle hole while out on parole to find where the enemy were. Blue's old mate Curl had a boy and girl and a wife he was longing to see. Curl said perhaps if we contact the Japs, they might have a homer for me. On the shoulder or hand, just a scratch, understand, you won't have to carry me out. Just a wound on the wing, put my arm in a sling. If I see you in Blighty, I'll shout. No stretcher for me, my legs will be free. I'll be able to walk down the track to the good old salvos whom everyone knows are the first ones you meet coming back. Some coffee, a scone, and then I'll move on, waving goodbye to the nips. There, no more I'll roam when I travel right home on the best of the hospital ships. Words spoken in fun, a Japanese gun spewed bullets through Curly's eye. Blue carried him in while the boys raised a din with everything they could throw. Then we kept our heads down beneath the hill's crown and grovelled around in the mud. It was Blue's Freckles' hands that tightened the bands which stopped Curly's flowing blood. Our leader, Aloot, said, there'll be no pursuit if we slip away after nightfall. We must report back. Curl's had a bad smack. Better risk losing one than lose all. Blue turned to persuade with gun and grenade and cover, I'll give it a burl. If more come, he said, then we'll be dead, and there won't be a homer for Curl. We'll clean them right out and put them to rout. The cross we erected still stands. We laid him to rest, and over his chest we folded his big freckled hands. A gesture I gave, saluting the brave. Then, what happened to Curly, I said. He gave my shoulder a touch as though talking too much while slightly inclining his head. And would you believe he had one empty sleeve? I turned, gave the pokies a whirl. I noticed his hair, though grey, was still there and rebelliously trying to curl. All right. Now one more homely. Smoke from the chimney at home. When you've been harried and hunted hard and the chase has been far and fast, you know the relief in the wild beast's heart when he finds his lair at last. So it was with me when I once returned to the home I'd loved since birth, where the smoke curled over the chimney top like no other smoke on earth. I saddled a wild and wayward horse as fresh as a frosty morn to shepherd a mob of roguish cows on the graze near the unpulled corn. I called the dog for a whistle that rang to the crest of the highest hill, and I knew by his bark and his joyful tail that he remembered me still. The rippling creek sang a soothing song as it paddled from pool to pool and looked as enticing as ever it did when we swam in it after school. The old home slept in the yellow box trees, and all turmoil seemed to cease as the smoke blazed up from the chimney top like smoke from a pipe of peace. The man who roams is a man thrice cursed, and the call came wild and strong. This time I left in a thoughtful mood, and the last look back was long. There was never a man who wandered far, whatever his breed or birth. but reckon the smoke from the chimney at home like no other smoke on earth. Smoke from the Chimney at Home by Colin Newsom. And that's our poet of the night here on Chillin Tuesday, Colin Newsom. All right, I've got another one here. Pea picking, because it's was quite common up this way back in the day. People would be they grew a lot of peas up this way. Rising when the sparrow starts to stir himself and twitter, we pack our lunch with happy hearts, soon likely to grow bitter. The blaring noise that rents the morn could by the nearest stray chance be tigers roaring o'er the horn of farmers' smiths' conveyance. Happy hearts that speed along upon the farmer's lorry, joyful voices raised in song, although they'll soon be sorry. Happy toilers, mostly young, though here and there and olden, boys and girls with witty tongue, with laughter that is golden. Wanting rows of peas, grown and thick, toss coins and take what luck gets. Swift along the rows to pick, we line our bags and buckets. Then each family car arrives with children of all ages, widows and deserted wives, pairs supplementing wages. Blankets thrown across the fence shield the baby's mattress, mothers earning welcome pence for the bootless and the hatless. Here and there a babe asleep, one tied to the wire, boy blue slumbering with Bo Peep in shadow of a briar. Wind blows hard upon the gaps, the short shirts and slacks make. Some stretch and swear and groan perhaps, complaining that their backs ache. People on a tourist bus, in search of sights and scenes, alight to stop and stare at us peculiar human beings. Innocent, for they so wise, the question of the conductor, bored to death, he tells them lies. He really should be struck for. Tourist folk from overseas and far across the oceans believe we people picking peas are here for our devotions. Why do those people stoop and kneel? What are they crouching there for? What urgent actions do they feel? Some deep religious fervour? They kneel beside each bushy vine, they turn it up and shake it. Are they searching for a sign? Is fruit they gather sacred? They backward lean and search the sky, beseeching God to love them. They hold their kidneys while they cry the name of Christ above them. And some denominations press their hearts with fervent frail moans. They reach behind them and caress their buttocks and their tailbones. Do they intend to sacrifice the child tied to the wire? Would they pay this fearful price for serving their Messiah? Who's the high priest with the scales? Is he paid for weighing the contents of the bags and bales, picked by the people praying? No collection here of coins. This is strange behaviour. They bash themselves across the loins and call upon the Saviour. We pickers plod on, unaware of the curious and clamorous, ignoring those who stand and stare, and level movie cameras. We would be amazed to know, and doubtful should they tell us, that will be seen on slides they show to make their neighbours jealous. Here comes the produce truck to race the peas we picked this Sunday to the city's marketplace. For Brisbane every Monday. Monday. Yeah, that's how it finishes, yeah. Well, yeah, look, it's getting interesting. All right. Now, just south of Tenterfield, sort of up on the right as you're travelling down the New England Highway, is a place called Bluff Rock. Fascinating place. It's just amazing rock that just sticks out of nowhere. Anyway, here we go. Massacre of Aborigines at Bluff Rock, 1844. The rich lands ran enough stock, but the white men wanted more. The dark tribe met at Bluff Rock when the whites made open war. Squatter, settler, herder rode out to kill that day to kill. Rode for rape and murder, rode on the devil's will. But the tribe danced to a frenzy in the death corroboree. Oh, couldn't those pale-faced men see what the sad outcome would be? The tribe, a death song chanting, ran to the Bluff Rock rim, where it fell in a cliff, not slanting, straight down, and its depths were dim, decked with daub and feather. Husband, child and wife, the dark ones leapt together as they had been in life. Sweethearts, sisters, brothers, they all leapt hand in hand. In-laws, fathers, mothers, leapt for the spirit land. Did his own destruction shock him? Did the white man feel remorse, looking down from the crest of the rock rim, astride his sweat-stained horse? Where the dark tribe distorted, their limbs all twisted lay, the stock horse shied and snorted, and the white man rode away. A stench rose up the highway. All the animals left the place, and the teamsters made a byway round the bones of the martyred race. No sign to tell the violence once enacted there. The white man keeps his silence. In shame we all must bear. Let us probe no more this mystery the powers refuse to name, an event from Australian history the whites exclude in shame. Bluff Rock, clear as glass where New England highway wends. 1 million tourists pass there, yet none may tell their friends this tale of words in magic, while listeners hold their breath, of the dark tribe's splendid, tragic, noble leap for death. When you pass there, hold your breath. Keep one brief moment still. Remember the dark tribe's death leap from the crest of the rugged hill. Yeah, well, terrible, terrible, terrible thing that happened. There's a few quotes after this. Edward Irby, owner of Bolivia Station at the time, wrote, "We punished them severely and demonstrated our superiority." Thomas Keating, in his memoirs, wrote, "After shooting some, the men got up to the rock and threw the blacks off the rock to the ground below." Old hands, including beardy George Stewart, reared by the Irbies, said, "Some were thrown over, others jumped." For years, the New England tourist promotion bodies have searched our highways for locations of interest, which tourists may find fascinating. What a laugh. They've ignored Bluff Rock, which towers majestically above the New England highway between Glen Innes and Tenterfield. There used to be several signs pointing proudly towards this outstanding landmark. These were strange, as it seemed, pulled down just after my poem depicting the massacre was circulated. On the wider highway between Inverell and Moree, there is a sign, Slaughterhouse Creek, which was named after an Aborigine massacre which took place there, no doubt. That sign would also be removed if attention was drawn to its origin. Bluff Rock and Slaughterhouse Creek, or Mile Creek massacre, received some degree of documentation. I know of others which did not. Now, historians say we cannot accept that no documentation is, in the word of the old hands, good enough. We believe the Bible undocumented for thousands of years. Why not 3 or 4 generations? Mile Creek, tributary to Slaughterhouse, received most attention because MacDonald, Land Commissioner, appointed custodian of Aborigines, saw his duty plainly, and he had a dozen or so white men hanged for the atrocity. Tried first under Australian law, they were acquitted. Retried under British law, they were found guilty of murdering the innocent unborn children of the Aborigines. Some of the females were pregnant, but these men, though brutal, were poor. MacDonald didn't proceed against the Irbies, who were wealthy and related to the royal family. He had a reputation for fearless devotion to duty. Perhaps the story of the number which jumped to their death against those slain was grossly exaggerated to placate MacDonald, who, judging by his record, would have inquired. This may explain the weirdly sly grin some of the very old men I knew as a boy would give as they told the tale. This coincided with the emphasis on the jump as they came to the part, that's where the blacks jumped over the cliff. I feel they were repeating the emphasis from the tales they heard by others who actually took part in the massacre. MacDonald's punitive action had some effect. I have heard of massacres where women were spared. The massacre of Ginny Go Mad was one on the Henry River, east of Glen Innes. Here, the women mourned their men long and loud, embracing the slain bodies while they poured ashes over themselves. Feeling that the women may like to bury the dead, and no doubt dreading the terrible smell which must ensure, some white men brought shovels to the Aboriginal women, indicating how they should use them. Seizing the shovels, and I presume picks, the women attacked the white men and hurled their tools after them as they retreated. And that's how the area was named. This may not have been documented before, but it is now by hearsay. American districts don't hide their history of Aboriginal massacres. They exaggerate them, and tourists love them, particularly the children. The following poem is about an Aboriginal bushranger named Black Tommy at a still standing hotel and Cobb & Co. changing or staging place on the Guida Highway about 16 miles from Glen Innes. Depicts a place and a happening which has also been ignored by the highway tourism promoters. Speaking of bushrangers, highway tourism promoters ignore the many places on the roads where a thunderbolt robbed coaches and travellers, and the place on the road between Glen Innes and Inverell where the great artist Roberts painted his classic scene Bailed Up with laconic coach driver Bates, who had been bailed up there by Thunderbolt. Colin's painting, which with many reproductions is now hailed as a masterpiece. Thunderbolt on his record was as game as Ned Kelly, as courteous and romantic, and gave more to the poor and lasted 5 years longer than Ned. Alright, now back to Black Tommy. Incidentally, when this poem was first written and circulated in pamphlet form, the sign Tommy's Gully was taken down from the gully on the Guida Highway bearing that name and marking the place where Black Tommy was shot. The sign had stood there with renewals for the best part of a century. A well-meaning citizen has replaced it a couple of times only to find it removed again. The shooting of Black Tommy at the Bald Knob Hotel. I was driving out at Donnelly's when the big rains fell, and I camped with Jimmy Ridley in the Bald Knob Hotel. A cyclone rain to ease the drought of 1965, when everyone was battling hard to keep the stock alive. Bob Marshall spoke of olden times, till we heard a bullock bell and time slipped back 100 years at the Bald Knob Hotel. I saw the bearded teamsters with their wagons camped in lines and heard the music of their bells, fair dinkum condamines. The miners in their boyangs and their cloths all stained with clay, and moleskin clad the cattlemen were there to spend their pay. The Chinese in their pigtails were so real I could smell the incense from the Joss house near the Bald Knob Hotel. Wild Black Tom, the outlaw, drinking brandy, treble star, threw a golden nugget down and shouted for the bar. Violins and concertinas, and someone gave a yell. Bullockies, mazurka, at the Bald Knob Hotel. A four in hand from Cobb & Co. came dashing in the door. The passengers came in to join the dancers on the floor. The stagecoach driver drank a beer and glanced around and said, "The governor raised the bounty on Black Tommy's head." "Black Tommy," said the governor, "can jump into the well," and they all drank to Tommy's freedom at the Bald Knob Hotel. Every man around the bar had heard the story told. The police won't take Black Tommy till he leads them to the gold. The secret gold mine in the hills that served Black Tommy well. Police had tried to track him to it from the Bald Knob Hotel. The next drink Tommy got was drugged. I saw the barman run to get the police and keep away from Black Tommy's gun. He could shoot an apple off a tree as straight as William Tell. He'd given exhibitions at the Bald Knob Hotel. A friendly sympathiser whispered, "Tom, you'd better go. I think that you've been sold out by a dirty so-and-so." Black Tommy cried, "I'm poisoned," and he lurched away and fell, and the troopers came and shot him at the Bald Knob Hotel. The people stopped their drinking and they cried out in alarm, "Poor Black Tommy never did us any harm." And they went out in the darkness and they found where Tommy fell, and they carried back his body to the Bald Knob Hotel. There were sons of convicts there, and the shepherd's little imps were heard to cry out, "Treachery!" and "Murderers and pimps!" The miners got their shovel and they buried Tommy well, but they didn't drown their sorrows at the Bald Knob Hotel. The stout old building stood the test 100 years of time, while men still talk of Tommy's gold in story and in rhyme. The mountains of the eastern fall keep Tommy's secret well, and an old historic building is the Bald Knob Hotel. So Tommy's gold might be still out there east of Glen Innes on the... All right, look, the next one I'm going to do here is directly related to Gyra. It's even got the word Gyra in it, so it's how the little boy lost was found. Stephen Walls, a 4-year-old, lost 4 days and 4 nights. "Yeah," said the grizzled old bushman, "I saw the little boy lost, a film produced in Gyra and shot at enormous cost. Yeah, it was very authentic for those who took part in the search, the people on foot and horseback, the hills and the bush and the church. But one thing they did mention and failed to emphasise was the name of Billy Scrivener, the bushman whose very sharp eyes were the first to see little Stephen where he crouched as though trying to hide in fear from the thousands of searchers who covered the whole countryside. And the famous cry, 'Where's my daddy?' that rang from the anguished lad could have had another meaning, like, 'What have you done with my dad?' Had the boy seen his parents weeping, surrounded by men looking grim, and thought the strangers were baddies who were also looking for him? If that line of searchers had missed him as previous lines had done, the story that thrilled a nation may well have been a different one, and there would not have been cheering from the searchers down on the ground when the planes flew over and dipped their wings to say, 'Little boy lost is found.'" Yeah, that's it, eh? Well, what else have I got for you? I've got one more here up the back before I say good night and goodbye from Chillin Tuesday for you. Pegleg Jack's Ghost. Most bushmans have seen peculiar things in their years of knocking about, but they won't tell their tales to the sceptical and those who cast a doubt. Here's one from Ted Alexander with the capital asleep at night, while the dark men sang corroboree songs in the land of the Min light. How, surrounding the old Warwick homestead, a veranda 4 feet high, was the stamping ground of Pegleg Jack, while the stars were in the sky. It had been a big place years before, now outstation or outpost where a boundary rider lived alone with his dog and Pegleg's ghost. When Pegleg's ghost was stamping round unseen but plainly heard, the boundary rider gave no sign and never said a word. He sat by the fire smiling in a mystical way he had, and because he wasn't afraid of ghosts, the bushman thought he was mad. A swagman camped in the old bush home. In his swag on the hard wood floor, he felt Pegleg's stump go through his heart and he wouldn't camp there anymore. He told the story miles away, how Pegleg spoiled his rest and showed the imprint of Pegleg's stamp, a circular star on his chest. A man who had watched for the gyre ghost and challenged the Min light came out to capture Pegleg Jack. But he only stayed the night. Head stockman Sweeting at mustering time came out with his riders three and told the boundary rider that they would keep him company. Sweeney or Murphy, some Irish name, how my memory fails at critical times to embarrass me when telling these old bush tales. When the boundary rider got ready for bed, they told him with hums and ahs the nights were too stuffy to sleep indoors, they'd rather sleep out under the stars. Joe West and Ted Alexander camped there and were snug in their bed in their swags on the high veranda when the boundary rider said, "Me dog's barking and growling. I haven't the slightest doubt that Pegleg's ghost is uneasy and will come for a walkabout." Brains said, "Some houses creak at night, in different soil and sand, and in changes of atmosphere. Timbers contract and span." "Shut up, Brains," Drover said. "Don't put in your oar, or blokes who know the best ghost yarns won't tell us anymore." Ignoring Brains, Ted told us how Pegleg limped cluck, cluck, straight to where both he and Joe lay rooted to the spot. He didn't stab with his cruel peg leg like he did to the swagman's chest. He sidestepped Ted Alexander and jumped over Joseph West. Yep, and that's it. All right. Well, that is been a really interesting journey of Colin Newsom here tonight with Chillin Tuesday. So what else have we got coming up here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame in the next week and a fortnight? Well, heaps and heaps and heaps of interesting stuff. Well, this Saturday night we've got the film showing 2,000 Mules, showing evidence of vote fraud in the United States election in 2020, and then after that there will be a discussion on corruption in Australia and the new Anti-Corruption Commission. Then Friday the 29th of September at 6 o'clock we got a karaoke party here. Wow. On the 30th of September, that's to kick off the Trout Fest, the 29th. 30th, we've got them up. Also on the 30th, the Gyra Trout Fest Country Night, featuring Beck and Layla White, supported by Richard Stanley. And the Poets Breakfast on the Sunday morning, 9 o'clock, with the youth poetry competition. Then on Monday, yes, it's Thundercloud's Australian Poetry Show. Yeah, that's my show. Yes, it'll be me. And then coming up in November, we've got the New South Wales Bush Poetry Championship with both written and performance. You can get entry forms from the website australianpoetryhalloffame.com.au/downloads or events, and check that out. That's part of the Poets on the Mountain Festival, and you can also put in your entries into the Australian Bush Poetry Film Festival as well, and check out that on filmfreeway.com/Australian Poetry Film Festival. Alright, I am Thundercloud and my voice is given out, but I'm going to give you one more of Colin Newsom's poems here, and just a nice random one, The Drover's Camp. I, who understood the sewage in the city's crimp and cramp, choose a gum tree for a toilet on the windy side of camp. And as I walk back to the circle that the campfire's embers cast, the old dark man's remonstrance hit me like a winter blast. The human pig was seated with his back against a tree, and he said, "No blanky nigger ever speaks that way to me." I said, "Don't call him nigger. He's human and he has rights. And in some way he's better than are many of the whites. And he who learns his manners from the dark man and the tramp will never make his toilet on the windy side of camp." There you go. Song doo-doo-doo, and that's Colin Newsom. So, if you'd like to read more of Colin Newsom, The Green Tree Snake is just one of his many books that he did publish over the time. And I believe you can still get it on Amazon. So, yeah, here we go. Here's another little short one for you before I go. Shearer's letter to his sweetheart. As I take my pen in hand to write a line to you, I wish it were magic wand and the ink were witch's brew, to make me smaller as I write these lines of love and hope, so small that I can wrap myself inside this envelope. My penmate Bill would seal it and adhere a postage stamp, take me up and post me in the mailbox at the ramp. The outback mail would bear me through drought and fire and flood, by camel train and packer horse, over salt bush, plains and mud. I'd be handed to a pilot in an outback aerodrome, and the mighty bird would soar aloft to bring me straight back home. You would get me from the postman and give a joyful cry beside the little garden gate where we kissed goodbye. So, A Shearer's Letter to His Sweetheart by Colin Newsom. All right, fantastic, great bush poetry, that. One of our true legends of Australian poetry, Colin Newsom. All right, I'm Thundercloud. I will see you tomorrow night here for Wednesday Words. Don't forget to check out all the wonderful events and competitions coming up here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame over the next couple of months, particularly the youth poetry competition, etc., etc. All right, lots of love, and I'll see you later. Boom.